My name is Stephanie Colvin Roy, and I work through the Center for Promotion of Social Emotional Learning, specifically in the program I Can Problem Solve and the parent component Raising a Thinking Child. And it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. This is the second to last of our webinar series through SIPSL. The next one will be May 1st, also from 10 to 11:30 with Phil Tenaglia. And today you are very lucky to meet one of my favorite presenters, Erin Bruno. She is the director of the Social Decision Making Program, and she's great. And she's planned quite a few interactive activities for us today. And I'll pass it over to you, Erin, so that I don't take any more of your time.
All right. And hello, Stephanie. And you're one
Hello.
of my favorite I can problem solve people. It's awesome. It's great to be in Pennsylvania. I'm actually based out of New Jersey, but we're neighbors, so
Yeah.
it's all wonderful. So welcome everybody, and I'm really excited to be working with you today. If you could just do me a favor, just so I kind of get a little taste of who's in the room. Oh, and I see you guys can read this, follow the This is awesome. If you could put your name, just what you do professionally, teacher, social worker, support staff, administrator, and what grade level that you work with, that would be awesome. All right, so a lot of K-12. This is good. Our high school counselors. Good morning, administrator, 9th through 12th. Awesome. All right, so we're really focusing on the upper element. Although, all right, we got a mid, upper elementary, mid, or all right. This really gives me a flavor. So as I'm going through the program today, or my little speech or conversation or training, I invite you to just think about how this applies to you. And this is where we can really, get down to some really concrete things that you can take away with, right? Because that's really my goal, is to sort of share with you some of my experiences, share with you some of the skills that might be helpful, and then adopt and adapt. What would work for you? Yeah, so that looks like we definitely have middle and high school. So my name is Erin, and I am the director of the Social Decision Making Program, which is an evidence-based SEL program. I also do a lot of school climate work, a school climate specialist, and anti-bullying work. So that's kind of me in the nutshell. And I've been doing it for about 30 years. I know I don't look that old, but I have been doing it that long, and I'm still fascinated and excited about this work. Another Erin. I don't meet too many of you, so nice to meet you, Erin. So what I'd like us to do quickly, just have to move my screen here. There we go. So just a quick feelings check-in. So what I'd like you to do is take a look at the screen and see which picture of which animal kind of corresponds with how you're feeling right now. And in the chat, if you could put the animal and maybe a word or two why you're feeling that way, that would be helpful. So just take a look at the screen, and I'll actually participate too. And which animal corresponds with how you're feeling right now? And maybe a word or two why. Anna Marie, I'm right there with you, looking for that nut. Absolutely. Eagle. That's awesome, right? Have to communicating, responding, a squirrel. There's so much to do. Fish in a bowl, cool and calm. B, networking, parent education. That's great. Goldfish, drowning with student behaviors and motivation. Oh gosh, Kevin, I can feel that. I need an ostrich pic. That's a good one. Maybe I'll stick that in. What is it about you just want to put your head down? Squirrel, have a lot going on. Awesome. Great. All right, just give a few more seconds. I think everybody's had a chance to respond. And so what I'm going to do, we're going to process this, but the first thing I want to do before we process it is you've kind of identified how you're feeling, you're in touch with that. And what I'd like you to do is just take 10 seconds to kind of roll your shoulders, take some breaths, do what you need to do to kind of transfer or transition from all that out there, and we've got an hour and a half to spend together, and just what you need to do to be focused and ready and excited for our time together. So I'm going to give you 10 full seconds to make anything that you need to do, some breaths, and I'm going to stop talking so that you can do that. Okay, thank you. So what I'd actually like to do now is just process this a little bit. As I work, I follow this kind of teach, model, prompt, practice idea, which is a skill building model. And so I work with young people, I work with adults, and no matter what I do or how I do it, I'm always teaching, but I'm always modeling, right? Because I think that's a really important part. So I do this activity every time I do any kind of presentation. Actually, even if I'm doing a meeting, I do some kind of feelings check-in using some kind of picture piece. Any ideas why? What does this help us to do? Why do I have this activity? Feel free. I think there's not a large group. If you want to unmute or if you want to put it in the chat, it's really up to you. What is it about this? What is this? What does this activity help us to do?
I think it helps us to reflect.
Absolutely, right? Reflect. And reflect on who? Or what?
Ourselves.
Right, ourselves, absolutely, right? Reflect on ourselves. Help us do that self check-in, right? And what skill is that helping us to practice? Give us a chance to be present or able to focus, yeah, at the task at hand. Absolutely. And what are the SEL competencies, thinking about that? What does that help us to practice? Self-awareness, right? And self-awareness leading to self-management. Self-awareness so foundational to self-management. If you can name it, you can tame it. And so that practice of checking in with who we are, where we're feeling, everybody's got all that stuff going on there, and helping make that transition. The other thing about this activity that I like to do is to help teach my young people, teach my adults to take responsibility for how you're feeling. And then there's something that you can do about it or manage it so that you can focus, right? Honor it, acknowledge it, and then do what you need to do to get into the work at hand. Any other reasons why I do this? Any other reasons as a facilitator, as a teacher? Any ideas? What else does it help me to do by asking you? I'm absolutely modeling it, right? So how you could do it for young people, how you could do it for a group that you're leading, absolutely out. And what does it help you to do? So it helps the students or your participants check in with themselves. And as the facilitator, what do you gain from that?
I think you get the kind of a feeling, a pulse for
Right.
where
Get a
people
pulse,
are,
where
and that
people
can kind
are.
of
Yeah.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Temperature of the room, right? And it's so important as knowledge of your audience for sure, right? Warm us up a little bit to check in. We're SEL people, social emotional learning people. We're going down that path. And so when we think about, you gain a level of trust, right? And a temperature of your audience. And so I'm not going to lie, there have been times where people kind of don't participate in this first activity. So I know we're going to need a little bit more warming up, right, as we go through this process. But remembering the name of our workshop today or our session today, connection. How is this important to connection? How does doing a feelings check-in connect to connecting? Again, you can unmute or put in the chat. What is it about feelings check-in and self-awareness? How is that important to connection? And and is it Kiera? Did I say that right? Yeah. That's part of it, right? You gain a level of trust, and when you trust somebody, that connection can happen. Other may be feeling the same way, right? With a bunch of squirrels. Thanks, James. Appreciate that. Right? Absolutely. But it helps to build that empathy and and that connection. We're all feeling very similar. Many of us are feeling squirrely. I noticed no one was feeling skunk-like, but we'll leave that alone for right now. So thank you guys for being willing, giving everyone a voice. Absolutely. And knowing the temperature, how we feel is often contagious. Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, building those connections starts with self-awareness, starts with us being able to identify how we're feeling, what we're feeling, and helping the teachers to identify. So thank you. So as we're going through this process today, I have this set of community agreements that I just want to get your opinion on, and if there's something that we need to change or add or take away. But this is generally the ones that I use. So respect each other, right? Assume positive intent. And does everybody know what that means? Is anybody willing to share sort of their take on assume positive intent? And this is the one that I have to work the hardest at. I'm going to be honest. Love assume. Aaron, I see you. Me too. It's one I have to work hardest on. But it is something that I think is really important. What does it mean? Assume positive intent. Anybody have any? Assume positive intent gives grace and space. It absolutely does, right? We need, and if we don't assume positive intent, it's going to be very hard to connect with those we might not necessarily agree with, right? Believe that others are acting from a place of building up rather than assume they're being negative. Absolutely. Believing that somebody is doing the best they can with what they have, right? Keep an open mind and an open heart. We can disagree on the way they do things. We can disagree on what they say, but assuming that the person is coming from that place that they truly believe that, right? And so for me, I always sum it up thinking about we can debate the choices, but not the person, right? Candid and compassion, absolutely. Actively participate. That means different things to different people. It may be hard to believe, but when I attend a workshop session myself, I tend to be quieter. I'm more of an introvert. It takes me a little bit longer to process things. So I can respect that. But so actively participate the way that feels right for you. Self-care. We're not taking a formal break, but obviously if you need to get up, and I know as educators, we are rarely sitting. So if you need to stand or whatever, I would love if you could have your camera on. If you can't, I understand. And the main reason is just, so that I can see, so that don't feel like I'm talking to a screen. But I do understand there are times when that's just not possible. And have some fun, right? Have some fun, because at the end of the day, neuroscience confirms if we're having fun, then we are actually learning. So by a thumbs up, are these okay? Is there something I need to add? Is there something that we need to take away? Is there something that doesn't feel right? Thumbs up. Awesome. Moving on then. So I'm a quotes person because I feel like these amazing people say things so much better and set the tone. Jim, I never saw that before. That's cool. Or they come up like that. That was cool. So this sums up for me sort of my philosophy, my why, why I do what I do. But people will forget what you said. They'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And this one here, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. Right. So how important school climate is, how important classroom culture and climate is, how important it is for us to connect with each other and with our young people, not instead of academics, but so that the academics can happen, right? And that's why these are just so important to me. So another sort of quick activity that I'd like us to do, and this is something that I do when I'm working with a new group. because when we talk about creating the caring community, when we talk about creating the safe space, it can mean different things to different people. And so I like to just be clear. I like to hear people's voices. So in the chat, if you could put, what do you need to feel cared for? What is it that makes you feel like someone cares about you? What does it look like? And so I have some examples here because because it doesn't have to be a grand gesture, but what is it that makes you feel that somebody sees you and hears you and cares about you? So some examples that have come up: listen to me without rushing me, noticed when I was struggling, or remembered my name. So Susan, respect being heard, loving me for who I am. I love that. Genuine listening. Oh my God, another Erin. Hi, Erin. Intentional, being attentive, allowing me to be me. Asking more than telling. Listening and being attentive. Absolutely. I remember details of our conversation. So Christy, I think you do have access to a recording. Yes, you do. Thank you. Being vulnerable. You mean the other person being vulnerable, right? Thanks. No, we'll miss you, but hopefully you'll get to listen to it. All right. So this idea of being explicit about what caring means for me. So when I do this in a classroom or when I do this with a group, we put it on Post-its and being supportive and accepting. And we post it in the room, and I give students an opportunity to kind of look around and see what that means, right? And what that means to each of us. Any ideas why I do this? And I do this with adults too, and adults have a harder time doing this, but you guys seem to be right in there. But what is it about this? Why do this activity? What does this help us to do? Any ideas?
I think too, Erin, with this one, I think it's a way of sort of, well, first it gives us some information. I mean, if we start to see some common patterns, but it gets to that, I think, oh, me too kind of thing. And, maybe a reminder about what works.
Right. And a reminder, a me too, as the teacher, if we're always trying, or as the adult, I'm very often trying to find ways of connecting with students, and my way of connecting may be different. So just hearing from them, and it might change and move over time, but getting them to think about, and I want to honor that, right? Understanding what supports us so we can support our students, knowing how we can support people and how they want to be supported. I do a lot of work in a variety of diverse settings, and it can look different for different people in different situations. So I really, again, like to ask the people, and again, they may struggle with this and it may change, but getting them to start thinking about, I care, and I want you to know I care, and how can I show you that I care, right? And that's why I do this activity. And so this part, I'm going to talk a little bit about the research, not a lot, and then I really want to get into the skills. But very often I feel like I really want, you'll probably hear me say this too many times, so and I apologize, but I don't apologize, because here's the thing: why connection matters. It's not just that it feels good, it's fun, it's nice. Connection supports academic achievement and well-being, right? It's so that the academics can happen, not instead of the academics, right? And we are all here to educate our students, to educate our children, and that is our goal. And that those connection pieces are critical to that. And then SEL promotes the engagement and the behavior. It gives them the skills to be successful and to be able to connect. So this portrait of a graduate, when you think about your students as they graduate, and you're going to put this in the chat, what skills, traits will they need for success in life, right? What is it that they're going to need to be able to do to be successful? As they leave your school and they move on to where career, college, wherever they're going, what resilient lifelong learners? Absolutely. What are some of the advocate for themselves? self-regulation. I'm still working on that, James, no, Michelle, sorry, but we're getting there. Coping with adversity, building and maintaining relationships, empathy, right? And any of the other skills that they need for life or need for graduation, or effective communication skills, right? So this is where resiliency, self-awareness, right? Motivation is another one I see very often, right? And so when we think about all these things that we're talking about, all these skills we know our young people are going to need for success in life, and we think about, well, how do they learn these things? How do you learn to be resilient? How do you learn to be an effective communicator? How do you learn self-awareness? How do you learn this stuff? And I actually am asking the question, how do you learn it? How do you learn empathy and through relationships? Absolutely, right? Through our caregiver, parent caregiver, seeing it modeled, your environment, mentors, explicit instruction. That's where we are now for sure, right? Exactly, teaching, modeling, experiencing it, modeling it, absolutely. And so we know that this to be true. So that's where this idea, opportunity to practice safely, absolutely. See, I'm preaching to the choir here. And so that's what it is when we're talking about SEL, right? SEL isn't a program. There are amazing SEL programs like I Can Problem Solve, right? There are amazing SEL programs out there. But the truth is, SEL is not just a program. It's a process, and it's the process through which we learn these skills. And so that's where I always like to put this in here, because very often when I'm working with schools, this part of it comes into play where we have an SEL program. But if it's not part of your process, your students aren't learning these skills in the same way. And so I'm sure many of you are familiar with this castle wheel. So I just put this out here for that when we talk about social emotional learning, the center, the goal is life success, and the components: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision making, and relationship skills. That is what we're talking about. And so while we're talking about life success, a big part of that, right, is connection. And this just breaks it down a little bit. Again, just as a review, self-awareness helps our students recognize and understand emotions, self-management, regulating emotions, but also managing stress and staying motivated, social awareness, that sense of empathy and diverse perspectives, relationship, how to connect, how to effectively communicate, and then decision making, right? The ability to make pro-social decisions. And so what is social decision making? Again, this is just the foundation, and then we'll move. And I'm going to move really quickly through this but social decision making is just a program that focuses on social emotional competencies, where the readiness skills are some of the tools for decision making, and the instructional phase are the absolute learning of a problem solving strategy. But the biggest and most important part of this is the application. Right, the application to real life, the application to academics, and it was designated by Castle. Yeah. So some enduring understandings as we're moving forward with this. Caring relationships form the foundation of all lasting learning. Connection, right? Emotions affect how and what we learn, and goal setting and problem solving provide a sense of purpose, direction, and energy for learning. So as we're thinking about this and developing our programming, a couple of things, and I'm going through this because then we're going to get into some skills. And so when we think about how do we embed these skills, these skills for connection, so that our students have the opportunity to overlearn them, so they have access to them under stress, right? So we want to think in terms of prevention. So if we know that teaching self-regulation, or if we know that teaching effective communication is important, we really want to think about, and that's why I love the I Can Problem Solve, right? We really want to think about those early years. How can we teach this skill before they need it? Focusing, giving them the concrete tool to do that. So if we know connecting is important, if we know caring is important, if we know the ability to have and show empathy is important, we've got to give our students the skills to be able to do that in an effective way. And it needs to be part of our curriculum. It can't be one and done. We know this. If it's one and done, it doesn't work. And that's connected with the multi-focus, with the goal of over learning. Because, oh yeah, absolutely. So over learning being the last step. Over learning is actually when you're literally changing the neural pathways in the brain in response to a trigger or a response to something. Over learning means having access to the skill under stress. Right. So a lot of us might teach the skill of, say, emotional regulation skill. And I'm sure many of you have had this happen where you have taught a young person or an adult a skill for managing emotions so that they're not explosive, right? And practice, and you've spent, some time on it. And the next day, after you've spent all this time on this lesson, the student is in your office and you say, what's going on? And they got in trouble because of something. And you says, well, remember we talked about that skill. Why didn't you use it? And the response usually is,
Okay, it looks like she's gonna hop back on then.
That's always the worst because you never know when people stopped
Oh,
hearing what you're saying. So you're like,
yeah.
where do I go back to?
Well, that's just it. And her connection was good. So it's like you just never, yeah, for many of us, we have experienced this. Perfect. Well, hopefully she'll be back on here in a minute. Yeah, honestly, I just want to, because I was one that asked the question, and I think that this part is something that we do miss. We think we've covered it, we think we've gone over, but I mean, how many of you've worked with kids when they get into a situation and it's like, don't you remember we talked about this? But they really do need that explicit practice. And it's been my experience that that includes even as they get older, even our middle school students and high school students need that additional, the additional practice under pressure. Okay, I think we have Erin back. Let's see, let me just double check.
oh
no.
Yeah, sorry about that. I have no idea what happened.
There you are.
Yes.
It happens to the best of us. I was just telling them how much I appreciate your explanation for the overlearning. That was really helpful.
Perfect. Right. So, and so were there any questions? Because I overheard a few little things about this, or if at any time you can interrupt me at any time. I get excited about this stuff, and I get so I am perfectly away to move on to a different. All right, awesome. So this idea of overlearning, right? Access to the skill under stress. When students say to us, well, I didn't remember at the time, they're being honest, right? Because they haven't overlearned it. Or what somebody said to me too that was helpful is they haven't developed the habit. So when I'm thinking about, and it takes a lot of practice with feedback. It's not something that happens overnight, and it's developmentally appropriate, right? I mean, when we're 5, it's going to look different than when we're 18, or we're hoping, right? We're hoping. And so I make a joke about this, but it's true when it comes to emotional regulation. I think Michelle or Erin, we were talking about this a little bit, that needs some help. I've gone from, so in New Jersey, we have a lot of traffic. I've gone from being road severely angry to road annoyance, right? There's a win there. So our goal with all of these skills is overlearning, so that our kids can learn how to access the skill we're teaching them under stress. And that sums up this knowledge versus skill. Many of our students can, Google, how do I make friends, or how do I manage my emotion, or how do I, whatever it is, right? Google's, or now it's Chat GPT or whatever it is, they can Google it and get the knowledge, but they can't Google the skill. They can't access that. You need that practice with feedback, practice with feedback. And that's where that teach, model, prompt, practice piece comes in, where we've got to give our kids the skills. We've got to teach them how to self-regulate. We've got to teach them explicit instruction, I heard somebody say. But as important is we have to model it. And modeling isn't just how to do it, but modeling as adults. So I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up in a time where, and I had great parents, but you know, there was this children are to be seen and not heard, or don't do what I say, do what I do kind of thing. And we all know that doesn't work. So really the modeling piece, but also the prompting piece, developing that common language. So having some key skills that we're teaching that attach a prompting cue to it so that we can practice it, practice it, practice it, practice it. And I bring this up too, because when we're talking about building connections, it's the practicing of our skills, right? It's the practicing of our skills in real life situations. And that's where building connections is an amazing opportunity for us to model many of these things. Because when we think about evidence-based SEL or SEL that works, think of it in terms of a three-legged stool where the goal is the overlearning. But for that to happen, we need the explicit instruction of skills. And that's where your SEL curriculums come into play so powerfully, giving them the tools. But if we don't integrate and infuse it into our academics, into our how we engage, and if we don't integrate it into the culture and climate, our students aren't going to get the maximum benefit and the opportunity for overlearning. So when I think about building connection, I think about that is such an important part of how we create that. So I am actually going to ask you guys to think about for a minute here. How do we, or how do you intentionally connect? And let's go teacher to student first, right? Teacher to student first. So whether you want to put it in the chat, that's probably the best thing. How do we intentionally connect with one another? How do you, as a support person, as a counselor, as a teacher, as an administrator, how do you intentionally connect with your students? What are some things that you do? Using their names, right? Awesome. That's know something about, so you must have asked them what happened, know something about them, listen and encourage, ask about hobbies, spend time with them, getting to know them better. Awesome. Any other? Know their likes, dislikes, listen, right? Listen, it could be just be something as actually listening to them, acknowledging their strengths and their gifts, going out of my way to be present in the hallways, after school activities. Exactly, right? Just finding little moments to connect. And some of these are larger than those. Include them in the decision making, listen to their voices, right? Absolutely. There's so many ways, and it doesn't have to take a ton of time. How do you encourage connection student to student? What are some ways? Because so we're talking about connection, we're talking about teacher to student, and that's very, very important. But also teaching them how to connect with each other is really important. So what are some ways? Peer mentoring, lunch bunch, right? And then giving them some SEL skills on how to communicate in those lunch bunches. Any other ways you could think about how we teach students to student connection? Grouping them with students they don't know or aren't friends with. Absolutely, right? Small group activities, turn and talk. Absolutely, Margarita. Peer tutoring, sports teams, clubs, listening, getting off the phone. And that is why I'm going to be honest with you, this is so important, because our students don't necessarily, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but our students don't necessarily know how to connect with each other. And one of the challenges we're seeing, when they enter the workplace, is that's becoming a problem, that they're not able to connect. right? So encouraging them. So we want to think about intentionally developing these opportunities for our teachers to connect to the students and our students to connect to each other. And actually something that I don't have here that I should have is adult to adult. How do we intentionally build those opportunities? So I'm just going to ask the questions. How do we intentionally connect, whether it's teacher to teacher or teacher to administrator or, you know, caregiver parent to teacher? How do we develop those? Because that is important. And I'm going to make a note. I need to put that on there as well. What is it? How do we intentionally do that? Because again, if we're modeling, it needs to be part of how we do things. How do you staff meetings, opportunity to learn from one another, share resources, ideas, absolute authenticity is key. People know when you're not genuine. I know, yes, especially students, right? Especially, I feel that way anyway, but especially students, absolutely, right? So being authentic, again, which takes some self-awareness. So really thinking about how we can intentionally connect, because we want to create the environment where everybody thrives and succeeds. And here's the truth. Coping is important, right? And you guys mentioned earlier, there's some challenges for some of our students with some coping skills. And I agree with you, coping is critical, but I want to get beyond coping to thriving, right? I want to get beyond coping to thriving. And one of the important ingredients is that again, is that SEL stool. When we think about the environment, creating the culture and climate where everyone thrives. And by everyone, I mean our staff, our teachers, our support, you know, our mental health professionals, our students. How do we create that environment where everyone thrives? And so when we think about that, are you guys familiar with Robert Brooks, Dr. Robert Brooks? So he's from Harvard University. He talks about raising resilient children. He does a lot of work around resilience. And one of the things, and I bring this up because, again, for some of our administrators or some of the, you know, people have 4 basic needs for creating that engaging and resilient environment. And you'll notice what the first one is: to belong and feel connected, right? So how do we intentionally create those opportunities to feel like we belong, to feel like we're connected? Another big one, and you guys have mentioned this already, and again, this is as relevant for our young people as it is for our adults, being staff, teachers, families, parents, community. Self-determination, having a voice in this process. And that island of competence. Sometimes I think I live on the island of incompetence, but that's another story. Island of competence. Any ideas what that might mean? Any idea what the island of competence means? If you could take a guess. Basically, what it means is you are known for your strength as opposed to your challenge. Very often our kids with some of the biggest challenges, they know exactly what they are and everybody around them knows what they are, and it doesn't feel so good. But if we are living in the island of competence where we are known for our strengths, we are celebrated for our strengths, then as our challenges come up, we can work on them. But again, really focusing on that and focusing. So one of my schools, actually what they did was they actually, they had a tree, and they had every student represented as a leaf on that tree for their strengths, right? And everybody knew what that was. And then a sense of purpose. And again, this is as important for us as adults. One of the things about that sense of purpose are why. Why do we keep doing what we're doing? Why do we show up day after day? And very often when we lose that sense of purpose, burnout starts to seep in. And there's other reasons for that too. But for our students, why are they here? What is their sense of purpose? And how do we help them connect to that? Right? We know what our purpose is for them to be there, but giving them a sense of purpose, giving them a reason to show up. And again, some more of the research, we know it just creates an opportunity for our students to have less mental health issues, engage in less risk, use substances. So we know that this is all very important stuff. and again, this is just more of the research that I put up here for you to have. So when you want some light reading, because I am going to give you the PowerPoint at the end, feel free to go through. But I think you know this. And so again, at the end of the day, the brain learns best when it feels safe. It just does. Safe and inclusive environments open up the brain into learning and growth. So how do we do that, right? How do we do that? So what am I going to actually ask you to do? I'm going to put you, actually, let's see. I'm going to put you in a breakout group. And what I'd like you to do is discuss the following, right? What's one obstacle to connection you've seen in your, either in your classroom or in your environment? And why do you think that wall exists? What is it? What gets in the way of connection? And what's one small way that you either have successfully begun to break it down or think that might help in breaking it down, right? So identify one obstacle to connection, why you think that might exist, and what you have or could do to maybe help break that down or build a door is what I like to say very often. So let me just let's see. There we go. Let's do it this way. All right. We'll take about 5 minutes and we'll come back. I want to hear about what are some ways that you've been able to break down that door. Awesome. So it's funny. I don't do as many virtual trainings as I used to, but I still love the breakout room where it's like, yes, swoop them in and yes, swoop them out. So welcome back, everybody. So either feel free to unmute or put it in the chat, but what were some of the obstacles to connection? And what were some of the things, what were some of the keys that helped unlock the doors to connections? What are some of the things that you've been able to do to kind of mitigate or balance or think that you might be able to do such a thing? What were some of the obstacles first? Let's think about some of the obstacles. And again, I'm not, go ahead.
I'll share. Sorry.
Thank you.
I know one of the things that we were talking about in our group is that communication is an obstacle with that, that we see in the school setting. I was saying I'm not in the classroom directly, but I'm a school social worker, so I'm in the school setting. And I said that there's often a discrepancy between parent and scholar expectations, and then also the teachers. And one of the ways, of course, to fix that is to communicate better. And I was saying that more often than not, parents want to be involved in, their child's academic progress and what that looks like. But sometimes there's a disconnect in the parent-child relationship. So because of that, we're doing double duty, trying to work on them, being more forthcoming with their parents and same with the parents being more forthcoming with their child, but also too then communicating with the school and the teachers to let us know what's going on and how we can help.
Absolutely. I love that. And what I love about what I'm hearing so much of, I love about what I'm hearing. And one of the things of it is I can hear the empathy that you have for the parents, right? As you're trying to navigate that communication, and then the scholars having challenges in communicating, and that's developmentally appropriate, I think, to a certain extent, right? Young people having trouble communicating, but helping them, and you're doing double duty with less time and less people. I understand that. So I love that idea, though. Are there ways to build that connection? Thank you, Rebecca. It was nice to meet you. Cyber school and lack of access to technology, lack of communication, not following through. Time is a big one. That's a big obstacle. And when we think about it, though, I think it's so, putting that time in is so critical to success. So it is. It's a balancing act. And there are some things that don't take a lot of time, but you're absolutely right. Time is and can be for all of these things a really important issue. Even though we know that investing the time will help in the long run, it is being able to do that in a way that's allowable. Any other comments about that? Any other trust and not knowing that you're going to do with the information? Call parents, right? The caregiver parent communication. I think there's a history there. So there could be trauma there. There's a lot going on with that. So really nurturing and fostering that connection beyond the school. It's very challenging. It's very challenging. And then what you do, not knowing that what you're going to do with that information, right?
I
And
kind
how do
of
we
want to
be,
piggyback off of that, if that's okay.
oh, please.
I found also, I didn't mention this in our breakout session, but just kind of thinking of things, we live in such a, technology world. So for here in Delaware, the schools utilize what's called Class Dojo. And it's like the information system and stuff. And a lot of teachers, like even for behaviors or anything, they'll kind of just dojo the parent because it's easy. It's very convenient. The whole texting thing is very fast. So that connection of not making those phone calls, not having those important conversations, and there's such a gap there.
Right. And so does anybody want to say anything? Because I could, but anybody want to say anything about that? And what are some of the challenges of that? I completely understand why teachers do it. You've got what, 40, however many students, you have 1 million students. There's a lot going on. But when you get a text, it's just, or you get something on Class Dojo, and the teacher might not have meant it, but what could be the interpretation of what you read? If you capitalize the wrong word, if you don't capitalize a word, if you don't use punctuation, if you do use punctuation, right? Yeah, right. And so the connection gets broken, even though we're trying to so thinking about, again, and it is being creative, it is being about being a problem solver, but again, we're assuming positive intent. We're assuming our parents want the best for their kids and they want their kids to be successful. So how do we build that connection with them? And communication is a big one, but how do we communicate that solves the needs of all, right? Thank you, James. It was nice meeting you. It's nice meeting you. Yeah, and they didn't see the message, and I don't know, maybe they didn't. I know my Google, the way my Gmail populates is a little crazy, but yes, so a phone call assures they saw it for sure. And they hear the inflection of the voice, and you hear their inflection of the voice, and you can, build a communication through that. Cultural differences aren't addressed through text or email. Absolutely. And that can go to interpretation. How when I get a text message from somebody, depending on who it is, I'm like, oh, that was a little aggressive, like, and there's nothing there for me to pinpoint. It just felt aggressive to me. So thinking about when we name the walls, we can begin to find the doors. So we may or may not have the answers right here and now, but the first step, if you can name it, you can tame it, is naming it and bringing people to the table and talking about how we can build those doors, right? So what are some strategies thank you guys for participating in that. And one of the reasons I try to get you guys working together is while I have content knowledge, you guys have so much experience in your own environment. And I think you learn as much from each other, sharing what's working and some of the challenges. And I think it's important. And I don't think we as teachers, as educators, do it enough. So when we think about what are ways to cultivate connection, that daily connection, and that daily connection could be a smile, saying somebody's name, some morning meetings or a sharing circle, and then cooperative problem solving, the ability to help to teach our kids a process for problem solving, but then having them come together to do some cooperative problem solving. So we're going to go through a few of these. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what I call the sharing circle, creating that circle of safety. So the first thing I want to say about a sharing circle or the circle of safety, or some of my people call them team huddles, or I know they call them morning meetings, but it's an opportunity for students to come in a circle and share an idea. And the idea could be academic in nature. It could be a conflict circle. It could be getting to know you circle, whatever it is, but it's an opportunity for students to come together and sit in a circle and share an idea. What is it about a circle? What is it about a circle? What does the circle do if we're sitting in a circle? Why sit in a circle? you see each other, right? You actually, and very, everyone feels included. You're sitting in a circle, everyone feels included. Everyone is equal. There's no leader. And I'm going to say, I've been doing this work for a really long time, before cell phones. I should say BSF, before cell phones. And while they've always been important, I feel like these are even more important because our students don't have opportunity very often to look at each other when they're communicating. No end, right? I hope you'll be my friend from my Girl Scout days, right? Absolutely, absolutely. And so it's an opportunity for sit in a circle. And I know space can be an issue, but I've had a stand in a circle. I work with some schools that, space is an issue, time is an issue, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But we could stand in a circle. It's an opportunity for us to sit or to stand and to look at each other, right? And communicate. But there's some elements as the facilitator. We're the leader of that circle, and our job really in maintaining that circle and creating that circle, we want to have some clear boundaries, some clear guidelines of what's going to be acceptable here and what's not acceptable, right? Structure and predictability. We want to be socially safe, right? Creating that culture of collaboration and support. How do we create social safety where team members look out for one another? And then emotional safety. Students need to feel respected. People need to be valued and allowing them to express themselves. And then physical safety. And as the leader, it's our job to create this space with the support of our group. And then we want to set up the circle. We want to have a couple of simple rules for the circle. So these are the ones that we use for social decision making. And again, it's you want to just set those clear boundaries. So the first thing that we do is we use a speaker power object. Can anybody guess what the rules of speaker power are? If you had to guess what speaker power is, what would you guess it would be?
When that person who is the speaker is speaking and no one else.
Whoever has the object has the power to speak, and everybody else should have the power to listen, right? Everybody else has the power to listen. And so it is about having an object. It doesn't have to be a sparkle wand, although kids of all ages love my sparkle wand. I will say this. And I will say that I use speaker power with adults as much as I do with students. I don't know how your Board of Ed's meetings are where you are, but ours in New Jersey are somewhat chaotic. And a couple of the schools that I worked in have actually adopted a speaker power object for the adults, right? Because what does it help teach? One person speaking at a time. Right? We're going to be in listening position, which basically means we're going to listen to each other, and we're going to show that we're listening with our bodies, and we're going to show respect to one another, right? So within this sharing circle, we're going to utilize active listening, right? So has everybody heard of the skill of active listening? Has everybody heard of this skill before? Right? I'm sure it's that whole body listening, especially. So we're going to use listening position. We're going to listen and repeat back, paraphrase, and we're going to check for accuracy. So this skill of active listening is so important to connection. And so one of the things I say, every skill that I go through, I teach at some capacity, depending, right? So this may be a skill that you're going to teach your young people, or you have been teaching your young people, or your adults, or whatever that is. But this skill is also very powerful just in its modeling. I was working with a young man. I was working with a school. We were doing a trauma-informed SEL approach. And I was a young man. He was a ninth grader, had some challenges with self-regulation, and he had gotten suspended. He was coming back to school, and we were processing, and I was using active listening, trying to really hear his side of what happened and what and through this active listening, I was able to hear him and show him where he was on the right track, in terms of being able, and then I saw where it went off track, and we talked about it. At the end of the session, and this has never happened to me before, so I take this as a win, a ninth grade boy looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "Miss Bruno, you're the first person that's ever listened to me." And if you don't think that didn't affect our relationship, our connection, and his progress, so this idea of just utilizing this skill ourselves. and modeling this skill. And if we can teach it, it's even more powerful. It's a very important sort of conflict resolution skill. So what I'd like to do is have a little brief sharing circle. And so I'm going to leave it up to you because the voice and choice, right? I'm trying to practice what I preach. Would you like to do it as a large group, or would you like to do this? And I'll explain what first before you have to answer. So we're going to practice a sharing circle. It is a little bit harder virtually, although I do teach a course online where we do this. So I'm going to ask you to practice using speaker power in a sharing circle and using active listening. And what I'd like you to do is, what helps you keep going, or what is something you do when things get hard? Okay. So what you're going to do in the sharing circle is you're going to pretend you have the object. I'm going to pretend to pass it to you. You're going to answer the question, and then somebody is going to volunteer to go next. You're going to pretend to pass the sharing circle to somebody else, and they're going to answer the response. They're going to use active listening to answer and then move from there. Okay, so I'm leaving it up to the group. Would you like to do it in a large group, or would you like to do it in a smaller group? And you can put it in the chat. Yep. Awesome. All right, cool. Very good. All right. So I'll go first. So what helps you keep going, or what is something you do when things get hard? That's actually two different questions, but I'll just answer the first one. What helps you keep going? What helps me keep going is to actually get out and do workshops like this, either as an attendee or as a facilitator, because this work is hard, and meeting like-minded people inspires me, knowing that there's hope for the future, and that, that I hope you don't get insulted by this, but I feel like you're my tribe, or I'm your tribe, or I'm a member of your tribe. And so that's what keeps me going. Is anybody willing to share that? Now pretend to pass speaker power.
I'll share.
Thank you.
What kind of keeps me going is seeing progress that some kids make, and knowing that they are listening, and watching them grow and mature. Since I'm like K through 12, you get to kind of see them whenever they're younger, and also then as they grow up. And just praying a lot in my faith, and just reminding myself, like, why do I do this? And every time it's always comes back to the kids, and enjoying spending time with them and learning with them and growing with them. And knowing somewhere along the line you make a difference, whether you know it or you don't know it. And when things get hard, I try to make sure that I do self-care after I leave home.
Now, does anybody want to go next so that they can repeat back what Susan said, or?
Yeah, I'll go next.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so similar to what keeps me going is just
So Kevin, I just want to stop you for a minute, and I definitely want to hear. So what I'm going to do is just paraphrase back to Susan what she said, and then we'll hear from you, unless you want to do it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, awesome. Sure.
Yeah, no, so yeah, I understand. I feel the same way, is that you get to some kids, you know that at least something is working for some people in the building. So that definitely is a good thing that keeps someone motivated to go in. Similarly to you, I feel the same way about the parents who are active and showing interest in helping the students get better and learning what we're teaching them, and they're actually modeling it at home. So that's something that also keeps me going. As far as seeing with things get hard, prayer definitely works. Leaning on your coworkers and your administrators if you have good ones, that helps as well for me.
Beautiful, Kevin. Thank you. Does anybody else want to paraphrase what Kevin said and then share what they?
I'm sorry, I didn't paraphrase for you.
That's okay. I forgot to remind you. So there, we were both on the same.
Basically, you were talking about you gain strength from doing the seminars and being able to be around other people and understand that you're not alone through the process.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. Thank you for pointing it out. I appreciate that. So I'll paraphrase Kevin. Kevin paraphrased Susan in that he agreed with what she was talking about getting from the students and the power of prayer. And that for Kevin as well, it's about the parents and the parents who are engaged and who are connected. Kevin, did I get that right?
Yeah, yes, perfect.
Awesome. Right. So thank you guys for being willing to do this this activity. Any idea? So we did a sharing circle. First of all, the power of active listening, the power of being heard. A lot of you mentioned that connections is so important. And you're right, it is. And listening in as part of connection is so important. And one way to truly show that you're listening is through active listening. To be able to tell somebody what you heard them say. And that checking for accuracy, giving yourself an outlook, I might have gotten that wrong. So often we listen to respond as opposed to listen to hear. And so really practicing that skill as adults, if we could teach this to our young people, awesome, but really practicing that skill. And thinking about ways to create that sense of connection through being truly heard and taking that moment. So we think about this skill of active listening and sharing circle. How could, and again, because I know time is an issue. It absolutely is. And I think, I want to say, especially as you grow up the grade level, but I think it's an issue no matter what grade level you're teaching. How could you apply active listening or sharing circle into your practice? How could you take this to so that our students are getting the opportunity to practice, that they're getting the opportunity to connect using these skills? What are there some ways you can think of just off the top of your head or that you're already doing to practice this skill? To utilize a sharing circle or a team huddle or active listening in your practice, in your classrooms. Any ideas?
In our school, we started to do what we call restorative circles. So I was sharing with the smaller group. I liked it because, initially whenever you start the restorative circles, you're getting to know your kids. So you're starting off with very basic questions like your favorite food, favorite colors, and then just allowing the kids to help problem solve whenever another student in the group might be struggling. And we try to do whatever the elementary character trait is for the month, include that in there. And then on the high school level, just trying to provide supports and stuff for the other students to help them understand that they're not alone and being able to encourage each other and support each other so that they feel like this isn't just their issue, but it's other people's issues, and this is what they've done where they find like they're successful.
Beautiful. And Kevin does some restorative practices as well, restorative circles being step one of restorative practices, right? Community building, connection. So it's exactly. So whether you're calling it a restorative circle, a sharing circle, a team huddle, it's that opportunity for students to connect and get to know each other, create the safety. One of the ways, and I love that, Susan, anybody? Okay. One of the ways I've seen utilized, which is amazing, some of my high schools actually at the beginning of every week and at the end of every week, they have a quick team huddle. They stand, they don't sit because it would be impossible. They talk about what are our goals for this week, where are we going? And then at the end of the week, they reflect. They reflect on how the week went, what were some of the challenges. It does take time, but the benefits outweigh the time that it takes to do it, right? So opportunities for students to just get in a circle and share and build community and using that active listening. One of the things I implemented in one of my classes that I work in is that before you can answer a question, you must paraphrase what the person before you said. Practicing that skill so our classmates know we're listening to each other. It isn't just about listening to me, but listening to each other. right? So ways of really incorporating that into the classroom. So Kevin, you're saying you guys do you do it, once a week. And so the students are going to get better and better at it. So are there ways to incorporate it into, a social studies class or a science class, or, have a literature circle to share an idea, or peer leadership, or whatever it is, right? But just giving them those opportunities, because the more practice we have at it, the better we get, the connections are built. Any last comments about that? All right, we've got one more skill that we're going to go through, and we're going to do it in the large group. So we're all set. An introduction to problem solving. So this is one of my sort of favorite, I break this down because we talk about connections and we talk about caring, and all these things are very important, and empathy being an important part. So empathy helps us to feel, right? Empathy helps us feel what the other person may be going through. Compassion helps us to care. And problem solving helps us do something about it, right? Problem solving is the energy. So it's empathy is awesome, compassion is awesome, but then having that problem solving piece of it to help, right? So when we think about problem solving, we think about that skill of problem solving. It is a skill that can be learned, right? And one of the most important skills, or one of the most important ways to learn problem solving is through facilitation. So guiding, I've been trying to model that this whole workshop, probably ad nauseum, but guiding, facilitating, asking those questions rather than telling. What is it about facilitation and learning? What is that about? Why facilitate rather than tell? Any ideas why that might be? Why I facilitate somebody's thinking as opposed to just telling them what to do?
I think it gives them a sense of agency.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. No, so I think it gives them a sense of agency, and puts them back in the driver's seat to say, like, yeah, I'm not just guiding you through this, but I want what you are saying and bringing to know that it's coming from you.
Absolutely. And Margarita said voice and choice, and somebody else was going to say something too that, did you put it in the chat, or so they have purpose, their opinions taken seriously. Right. So facilitating, right? When we facilitate and ask questions, the brain is engaged. When somebody tells you, it's not energetic, there's no energy. And we all know, I think that's one of the reasons I was on the mental health route, but to be honest with you, I couldn't do it because, I would see people like, all I have to do is this, and this, and you're fine. Right. And we know that that's not how it works. When we facilitate someone's thinking, their voice is heard, their choice is heard, they're actively engaged in the process. When somebody tells you what to do, your motivation really may or may not really be there, right? There's no engagement. So when we think about problem solving is a set of skills. And there's a lot of, so when we teach problem solving, we're teaching a lot of different skill pieces here. We're talking about identifying feelings and self and others. Feelings and problems are linked. If you don't have a feeling about it, there's probably not a problem there. Or somebody else doesn't have a feeling about it, there's probably not a problem there, right? Feelings and problems are interconnected. Another piece of problem solving that's critical is being able to put the problem into words. Yes, I have a feeling about it, but I need to put it into words. I can't stay in the feeling. I've got to really be, what is it that is the problem? And once I've got that problem, I need to figure out, what is my goal? What do I want to have happen? So goal setting. And then this skill here, 21st century skill, 21st century global employers, this is the skill they're looking for in their new hires: brainstorming, the ability to creatively problem solve, to think outside the box, right? And this comes from Forbes magazine, that this is what 21st century global employers are looking for: creative problem solving, right? And then being able to understand consequences, understanding that our goals give us, choosing the solution that gives us our goal, the ability to action plan, and the ability to try again, because even the best solutions don't always work. So that resiliency. So these are the skills for problem solving. And one way we go about teaching this, right, is through facilitative questioning. So I'm going to, rather than have you break up into a group, I'm going to tell you a story, and through my facilitation, we're going to come up with the solution. Okay. And I'm not even going to use again, you'll get this, so you could use this if you'd like at any time. But so I'm going to tell you the story about the barking dog. All right. So, and this actually happened to our secretary. Our secretary, all she wanted was a house. She saved and saved and saved, and finally had enough money, put a down payment on, bought her house. So she was so excited. She was also very organized. So she decided she was going to take a couple of days off, and move, right? The awful job of moving. So she boxed everything up. The movers came, they moved everything for her. Everything went like clockwork. She was very excited. So she decided, you know what? Let me unpack the bed. Let me get into bed, so I can get a good night's sleep. So the next day I can start unpacking and really make my house a home, right? So she's feeling great. She's unpacking, and she got new sheets that just came out of the dryer, that yummy smell. And she's tucking in the sheets, and she's got that she's got a little lamp there. She's all excited. She opens the window because it's a beautiful evening, and she's just about to go to sleep. And this dog starts barking. And this dog barks all night long. So she gets up the next morning, and she's not feeling, she's feeling kind of tired because, the dog was up all night. But she's like, maybe just all the excitement of the day got the dog all riled up. Let me just get on with my day. So she gets on with her day, a little less pep in her step, but she's still excited, gets moving, does her things, goes to bed a little earlier that night, closes the window, just maybe she put the fan on, closes the window, and about to fall asleep, and that dog starts barking and keeps her up all night long. So Barbara wakes up the next day, and she has a problem. We're going to help Barbara figure out what to do. So how do we think Barbara's feeling? What are some feelings words that kind of connect with how Barbara's feeling? Tired, frustrated, annoyed, right? Annoyed and tired, right? Maybe disappointed, right? Discouraged, absolutely, right? And all these, and what I love about this too is we can have a lot of different feelings about a single thing. So even just by starting to identify how somebody else is feeling, regretful, right? We're expanding that feelings vocabulary, or the opportunity to expand that feelings vocabulary. We're also having the opportunity to sort of practice empathy. We're putting ourself in the shoes of Barbara, and we're coming up with these words, and she probably is feeling all these things, right? So she is feeling all these things. And so we want to figure out, we can't stay there. I'm still feeling it, but now we want to identify the problem, right? Because identifying my feelings isn't going to solve it, but can I put this problem into words? So how is Barbara feeling? I'm sorry. What is the problem Barbara has? What is Barbara's problem? If you had a sentence or two, what is her problem? What is Barbara's problem? She can't get a good night rest, right? She can't get a good night's sleep. And again, this is dog barking and she can't get sleep. Absolutely. Barking dogs are making sleeping difficult. And what's her goal? What's her goal? If her problem is she can't get sleep, what's her goal? Sleep. Laura, I understood that. Sleep. All right. So we've got our feelings, we've got our problem, we got our goal. Now comes the fun part. What are some things Barbara could do? Again, when we brainstorm, there's no wrong answers. Anything goes. Doesn't mean we're going to do it because we're in the brainstorming section. But so she could talk to the neighbor. What else could she do? What else could Barbara do? White noise. Absolutely. Talk to the neighbor, white noise. Let's come up with two more. What are some other things? Drown out the sound, right? Sleep in a different room. Wear earplugs, right? And so if I'm doing this with young people, we might spend not hours, but talk to the neighbor, create a routine, right? All these different things that when doing this with young people, we spend a lot of time here because we really want to think outside the box. We really want to get that thinking. So then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the consequences. And so we're not going to look at the consequences for all, but I'm just going to take the top 3 that came in first, if that's okay. So we're going to talk to the neighbor, white noise, and Stephanie, I'm going to put that with drown out the noise, if that's okay, and then sleep in a different room. So we're going to look at those 3 solutions. What's the positive consequence to white noise? Drowns out the sound, as Stephanie said, and you can get some sleep. What's the negative to white noise? What might be the downside to white noise?
A level of avoidance if you like don't go back to trying to solve what the issue is.
Absolutely. Maybe a level of an avoidance, or as Anna Marie said, more noise in your head, annoyed that you have to do it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So our next solution was sleep in another room. What's the positive to that? What's the positive of sleeping in another room?
You might get some sleep.
Right? You get some sleep, right? What's the negative? What's the negative? Choosing another room. I want my room. I want the master. I want the bed. The bed might be absolutely right. Might not be as big. Absolutely. So our next solution is talk to the neighbor. What's the positive? What's a positive to talking to the neighbor? Open communication. They might say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me do that." And they might bring the dog inside. And the negative might be what? They might not be nice people, or they might get mad, or they might, be, whatever it is, right? So now we've envisioned the consequences. And our next thing is to look at that and select our solution. Told to mind your own business, right? Absolutely. Neighbor not might be commendable. Absolutely. So if we were to look at the solutions, which one do we think we should do? White noise, talk to the neighbor, or to pick another room? Just in the chat, just put what you think. Talk to the neighbor, talk to the neighbor, talk to the neighbor. What we can't control first, what we can control first, talk with the neighbor. So maybe the white noise, right? Awesome. And so the truth is we could choose any of them. Our next step would be then we want to plan practice. We want to create an action plan. So if we're going to talk to the neighbor, what are some things we need to come into play? We might want to design a script. We might want to regulate our emotion. We might want to think about the time we're going to go over there to communicate with them. If we're going to talk about the white noise, maybe we got to go buy a white noise machine, or we got to think about what isn't going to irritate us. The point is focus on feelings and concerns. Absolutely. The point is really choosing a solution based on our goal, and then putting a plan together to make that happen. Now, we tried it. It worked. Great. On to the next thing. Or we tried it. What I love about teaching problem solving is it didn't work. Okay, what next? There's always something extra we can do. So this is a process using facilitative questioning to teach problem solving. And we can use social issues, we can use academics, we can use problems in school, we can use hypotheticals. We can also use this problem-solving framework to develop a project. There's a lot of different utilizations of the framework, but the goal is teaching our students to go step by step by step, by developing the skills of empathy, by developing the skills of identifying the problem, being goal-oriented, solution-focused, right? And this gives them that opportunity by teaching them problem solving. One of my favorite activities I saw with this was a history teacher doing sort of looking at different perspectives. So taking a problem solving framework and thinking about the Native Americans and the explorers, and looking at it from each other's perspective. What was the feelings, the problems, the goals, the solutions that they came up with, and how it affected, right? And again, giving us this idea of perspective as well. So I kind of rushed through that, and I apologize. And there's some other things on here that you'll have access to if it's at all valuable to you. And so what I'd like to do is I always end with some sort of appreciation or expression of gratitude or some kind of reflection. So what I'd like to do is in the chat, please just share something about today that you appreciate. We know appreciation and gratitude go a long way in building connection and community. So what is one thing about today that you appreciate? And please put it in the chat and we'll wrap this up. Thank you, guys. I love that. Tina, that's exactly why doing these things inspires me, because there are, absolutely overlearning. We're part of the you're a critical piece of that conversation. Is it Kira? Am I saying that right?
Yes, Kira.
Awesome. Listening to others' experiences. Beautiful. Absolutely. Taking time, Jeffrey, for our own learning is so critical. I hear you. Listening to others. Thank you. Well, I would like to say I appreciated your vulnerability. I appreciated your willingness to jump right in, and appreciate taking the time to schedule and spending us with these conversations. I appreciate that from you guys as well, Tracy. And I wish you well on your SEL journey, on your work. You guys are amazing. You will get the PowerPoint. If you have any questions, again, I'm a passionate SELer. Feel free to reach out and send an email. I can't promise quick responses, but I can promise a response. And so thank you. Have a wonderful day. Have a great summer. And I look forward to meeting you again, maybe at a conference or something sometime. That would be awesome.
So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erin. I mean, as usual, and I'm glad we had so many people join us today. But this was really excellent in terms of being able to really take something back and utilize it right away. Really, really, I'm echoing the comments about how you engaged us. So thanks very much. And thank you to everyone for your participation. Join us in the beginning of May for our final webinar for this fiscal year, and then we'll have good stuff for you coming in the fall. Again, thank you, Erin. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
And don't forget to do your evaluation so you get your
Please do
certificates.
evaluations.
Yeah.
That'll be sent out to you. And Act 48, yes, there is Act 48 credit. That's for those of you from Pennsylvania who want continuing education. And that probably should have happened with the registration, but we can definitely submit that with your attendance. Thanks very much. The evaluation will be sent to you probably pretty quickly following today's session. Thank you, everyone.